ECEBC Code of Ethics. So I'll just warm up people, but you are the only student. So Carla Hees is with us, and she is with the organization more, and she also can pitch in whenever she wants to. And we have Monica also. She's also one of the staff. She's the director of the Richmond campus. So she's on with us this evening. So welcome, everybody. Basically, what we are going to talk about is the ECEBC Code of Ethics. So ECEBC is an organization. It's a non-profit organization, which is formed by the Early Childhood Educators of British Columbia. They are basically there to support you in your practice of ECE. They want to provide you with whatever knowledge and information which comes from the ministry. They support you with the job opportunities, or they even are there when you are in trouble and you need some help, so you can go and ask this organization for support. Carla, correct me if I'm wrong. I think there is a membership fee and it's $100 per year. Is that right, Carla?
Actually, for students, it is $50 per year.
Okay.
However, as a student, you do not have a voting. You are a member. Great. Excellent. Well, I'm so glad you are a member. I'm the past president of ECEBC. I've been with the organization since 1990 and president.
Wow.
I was president for 2.5 years, and I've been on the board of directors for it's going on 8 years now. So I'm so glad that you are a member. Power in numbers, stronger together. So glad you are a member. That's awesome. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes, and Carla, one more question for you. Do they have a union or something? Are they affiliated to the union?
No, the only union there is BCGEU, and BCGEU is a specialized centers. ECEBC is an association. It is a charitable association through the CRA. It was formed in 1969 as the Preschool Teachers Association of British Columbia. ECEBC is currently celebrating its 51st year. Last year is this 50th year. We had the national conference here with the Canadian Child Care Federation. So no, ECEBC is not unionized. It does support unions. It supports all early childhood educators across the province. They are our voice. I'm a member. I am an early childhood educator. I'm proud to say that. And ECEBC sits at the government tables to be our voice. So I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you. So basically, ECEBC is here to provide us with a code of ethics. They came up when early childhood educators are working in the field. Many times we have a lot of gray areas in our field, like we don't know, like, is it the right thing? Because sometimes nobody is watching you, right? And what you need to be doing is following your own integrity, your own principles of integrity. Sometimes there's a lot of abuse and neglect which happens with children, especially when, it's human nature that we think we can do whatever when we are not being watched. But it is our own inner being, our own integrity, which guides us, right, when we are not being watched. So basically, when ECs join this field, we have a huge responsibility because we are working with a vulnerable section of the society. And to be working with the vulnerable section, you have to follow some ethics, right? And believe it or not, any kind of abuse, neglect, or maltreatment of children goes a long way in their development. And sometimes it goes unnoticed because the child is too young to complain, or the child doesn't even know that the child is being abused or neglected, but it has long-term effects, right? So, and also as ECs, we know already that parents, they put in a lot of trust. I tell my class all the time that our job is better than the bankers. People trust their money to the bankers, but they trust us with their own children, the part of their being, part of their bodies, part of their soul, right? So their entire thing, they trust with us. So obviously, somebody's, sorry, maybe I'll mute everyone. So that is why the responsibility is huge. And even though sometimes the society doesn't recognize our work, but we know what we are doing, and we are creating such a big impact in the children's lives that they will go a long way. I feel very empowered and blessed and privileged that when I was working in the field on the floor, which I miss sometimes now, that I have created an impact in their brain development. I saw that their foundation of their brain is like, I did my best. And especially when you are working with children who have been abused, who are coming from low SES, the impact is huge. And I don't know whether you have been to centers where children come from abusive families, children come from foster care, children whose parents are separated, or for whatever reasons they are separated from their parents. These children, they go through a lot of, ups and downs in their lives. There's no stability. And as we remember Maslow, on the basis of Maslow is that the children first need their bodily needs to be met, right? First, and then their emotional needs, social needs, and so on and so forth. And then you can expect children to be, learning something, or to be self-regulated, or to be compliant, to be following what the teacher is asking you to do. But if their basic needs are not met, it's useless to expect from children, right? So that's what ECEBC Code of Ethics deals is that, yes, you provide them with food, you provide them with shelter, but the rest of it is the emotional part of it, right? Where we are dealing with those emotions of the children, and they are dealing with our emotions too. So when we come to work, we have to be like in a state of balance, I must say. I always tell my students that you keep your luggage at home. Unfortunately, we are not to show our children when we are working in the field, oh, you had a bad night, or, you had a headache or something like that. But if you're on the floor, then you're on the floor, and then you have to forget everything, right? Or else you stay out and you don't come inside. And if you're not feeling your 100%, you don't come in, because if you're not mentally right, if you're not physically, you're not well, then you are not really there for the children, right? Your attention is somewhere else. And in that case, the children could be abused, children could be neglected. You might take an impulsive decision, which you shouldn't be taking. And so uh, these uh, these principles, they direct us that what are our responsibilities. They make us aware of our responsibilities as ECEs. So the very first, I'll just quickly go through the principles first, and then I'll touch base on them in details. So early childhood educators promote the health and well-being of the children. So as I said, based on Maslow, the first thing are their bodily needs and their physical protection of the children. So that's what we are responsible for. And the second one is by providing developmentally appropriate practice. So question is out to Lisa. You can unmute yourself. And if you remember from your courses, what is a developmentally appropriate practice, Lisa?
Developmentally appropriate practice is to meet the current needs of the children. Age can be a factor in helping decide what might be developmentally appropriate, but it's meeting the current social, emotional, physical, intellectual needs of the child at that time.
Yes, that's right. And also developmentally appropriate practice means when you are conducting any activity, or you are whatever you are doing with the children, it's age appropriate, it's appropriate to their culture too, right? And it's yes, culturally appropriate, and it is appropriate. It's according to the interest of the child, right? If the child is not liking it and you are forcing, then it's not a developmentally appropriate practice. And also according to Vygotsky, it's the skill level of the child, right? So you know that if the child is ready for the next level, then you would want to step up the activity, right? You want to make it harder. Or if the activity is too easy, then the children also wouldn't like it, right? So you give them the right amount, right, of difficulty.
Scaffolding and extension.
Yes, very good. You know your Vygotsky very well. That's cool. And the next one is early childhood educators work in partnership with parents and supporting them. So as we say, there's a kind of a joke which goes around in ECE, is like we sometimes babysit the parents, maybe most of the times, right? It's not the children, because for most of the parents, their children are their biggest needs. So anything, if the parents are happy, if we are meeting their expectations, then we kind of know that we are doing our job well. And always to understand a child and to give the best care possible to the child, and to provide the right amount of, stimulation to the child, we need to know what's happening in the child's life, right? And the best information usually comes from the parents, and that is how we are able to connect, and then we move on from there, right? When we know what's happening in their families, we know their cultural backgrounds, right? And the parents, they feel, they feel elated. They feel, like, oh, she's interested in our family. She wants to know more about my culture. She's not just talking about her culture or the mainstream culture, right? But if they are coming, especially families who are refugee families, right? They come from a very different culture. They are already in a shock when they come to Canada. So how do you deal with that, right? How do you find out, what are your cultural practices? What do you do if your child behaves in a certain way? What do you do? And then you can kind of, sometimes there could be a mutual conflict, right? That we handle such situation in a certain way at home, but then according to our ECE standards, we handle it might be differently, right? Maybe handling it differently. For example, a very typical case would be in some cultures, if the child has a little bit of runny nose, right? From that family, they would say, oh, we don't take the child outside because it's too windy, it's too cold, it's too wet. But then you have to explain to them that this is a licensing requirement, right? Rain or shine, doesn't matter. And how do you explain it to the parents, right? That's what it is. And those codes, these codes, they provide us those guidelines, like how do you connect with parents as partners, right? So we don't want to tell the parents all the time that we are ECs and we know better than they know, but we are in partnership with the parents, right? Always aligning with them and finding out what their expectations are, and then delivering it to the child. Then EC works in partnership with colleagues, so colleagues and other service providers. So obviously, we are not living on an island in the childcare center, and we are all integrated, and we should be fitting with each other like a glove, ideally, right? So, and if things don't happen, how are we supposed to deal with those situations? So there goes those guidelines too, that because we cater to the children, and children are very sensitive, right? Are you in your basic or post-basic, Lisa?
Basic.
Basic, okay. So later on, if you do your post-basic, you will know a little bit more about babies and how they react to adults' emotions. So the frontal part of the babies is totally connected with the adults' emotions in front of them, right? So if the baby sees an adult which is smiling, which is adult who is happy, or maybe at peace with herself or himself, right? Then they kind of feel that peace, right? But if you are agitated, if you are like showing negative emotions, the babies pick up very, very quickly. They are very sensitive to it, right? So when you are ECs, many times when I was working in the center, right, we made it sure that we never show in front of the children our mutual animosity, right? Ideally, you shouldn't have any when you are at work, right? And where the center where I work, they made it very clear that, and I really like that practice, and I want to propagate that practice, that before you go home, you say goodbye to everyone. You say, you sort out whatever you had mutual conflict, or, you didn't agree with something, or you felt that you were not being respected or something like that. The very day you clear it out. And therefore we were a great team when I was working at the Y, because it really helped me to move ahead as an ECE. It helped me to be, less judgmental about people and be more empathetic and understanding, which is a big, huge quality which ECEs should be carrying with them, like understand people from their point of view, right? So when we understand our colleagues, then we can work much better. ECEs enhance human dignity. So when we are working with young children, they are kind of not aware, right, that they know that this is their body and their body needs to be protected, but they kind of don't understand, and sometimes they're not able to explain to you, right? So starting from like very basic things as changing diapers of the children, right? So you just don't pick up a child and change their diaper, right? So you always give a heads up, I'm going to pick you up now and we are going to go to the washroom, and then you kind of, tell the tell the child or the baby, even in infant toddler classrooms, if you think that the baby is not understanding you, or maybe there's a language issue, or doesn't matter, but still keep talking on to the children and interacting with them will go a long way in providing dignity to them. And later on, we'll talk about more in detail. The next one is ECEs pursue an ongoing knowledge, right, and skills and self-awareness. So as you know, our license requires us to be every 5 years we have to have 40 hours of workshops. So how do we get ourselves educated? So we go through those workshops, but those 40 hours are minimum. Ideally, we should be taking as many as we can and constantly being in touch with the latest what's happening in the ECE world and what's happening with the research. I strongly encourage all my students in my classroom to be in constant touch with the latest research about ECE, right? So if you are a childcare provider, if you know about the latest research, then you might want to change your policies too. But if you have shut off yourself, okay, I have my ECE license, that's good enough for me, then I don't need to go away and find out more information, then that's a wrong attitude, right? Because we are constantly evolving, and we constantly need to know what are the best practices and what's happening in other parts of the world, right? So it's a good idea. Like a few months ago when I attended a conference where the lady was from Sweden, right? And so I wanted to know what they are doing in Europe, right? So just to know where we meet and where we don't meet, right? And why we don't meet in North America with the European things, or things like that. How are we doing things differently, and what is it we are doing the same thing? And that enhances our professional competence, right? So we know, the more we know, the more knowledgeable we are, the more competent we are, right? So it's very clear. And then early childhood educators demonstrate integrity in all their professional relationships. So integrity obviously starts from being honest. You have to stand up for the right thing always. So it doesn't matter. So unfortunately, things happen in childcare when we become the best of friends because we are working. But then I personally believe, and still believe, when I was working in the field and now still, my professional relationships are still professional relationships. You cannot bring them very close to your heart. You know why? Because if things come to reporting, you don't want to report your friend. If you see your friend has violated some rules and has gone above and beyond the code of conduct, I need to report to her, right? So I always think that your professional relationships have to be professional when you're working with children, because you never know when things can happen. And I worked in such an environment where it was always a roller coaster, always up and down, things are happening because children were from high-risk families, and the teachers needed to be on top of everything. So it's kind of you have to maintain certain boundaries, and it's not that we are going to be bad, or we want to take revenge on our colleagues or something like that. It's just being able to do the right thing, and it takes a lot of integrity, a lot of personal honesty to stand up for the right thing. Sometimes you can close your eyes and like wave it off, and I don't know anything about it, but you need to think about the child, what's going to happen to the child in future, right? That this person who has violated certain things for the first time, maybe then this person might do it for the second time and the third time. So you don't want to let it go, right? Because then many children could be victims of it. So unfortunately, sometimes we have to give up our personal relationships for the sake of children. And it has happened, and it will keep on happening in our field, that ECEs always stand up for the children, right? Do you have any questions at the moment? Carla, would you like to add something? Please go ahead.
Hi, Lisa, and thanks again for going through those. Actually, I don't want to take away from your presentation.
No. Go ahead, please.
So currently, through the National Working Group with the Early Childhood Educators of British Columbia, our principles are actually being updated. We're on version 6 of it. The principles actually have changed quite dramatically, including the wording. Do you want me to read through the new principles for you?
Sure, if you want
Not?
to,
Yeah.
because they are not out. This is from the G2 I picked up, which is on G2.
Yeah, and no, our principles of code, we're actually revamping the whole best choices ethical journey
Oh.
training. Being on the working group provincially and federally too. You were right in saying that the principles, what you were saying, but interesting enough, those principles don't have numbers. And the reason why they don't have numbers is the fact that one doesn't outweigh the other. They all have the same value, just exactly like you said. But the principles, some of the wording has changed, and we actually do have, I'm looking at it right now, we actually have 2 new principles that have been added in there. Do you want me to
go ahead, please?
Sure.
So, yes, you're very welcome. Thank you so much.
Again, we start off with early childhood educators because our code of ethics is also based on the UN rights of the child and the human rights. And so the 2 of them together have really set that structure for the code of ethics. And what we're saying is early childhood educators promote, and if you look at your old one in front of you, so can you pull that one up? And I've got my back end copy here. So if we go there, so early childhood educators promote the health and well-being of all children. It is now stated early childhood educators promote and advocate for the health and well-being of all children, being inclusive of all children, regardless of their abilities, their socioeconomic status, their culture, what have you. Principle number 2, as you said, again, we start off with a statement, early childhood educators use developmentally appropriate practices when working with all children. The new principle, when it is published, when it is brought to light, will say, again, just like you said, early childhood educators, this is where it changes, use current standards of practices when working with children within the context of diverse family structures, cultures, religions, gender expression and identities, and socioeconomic status. So it is quite more, as you said, more inclusive of all. The third principle, demonstrate caring for all children in all aspects of their practice. It is now, again, early childhood educators demonstrate caring and compassion for children in all aspects of their practice. Caring being core to our being as an early childhood educator as well. And again, early childhood educators work in partnership. We've changed it from parents because not all children have parents, right? Children are in foster care, et cetera. We now have that older generation caring for young children. So early childhood educators demonstrate caring, like I said, and compassion. Early childhood educators work in partnership with families, supporting them in their needs. Supporting them in their meeting their responsibilities for their children. So not to, but for their children. The next principle, we work in partnership with colleagues and other service providers and community support well-being of families. It is now stating that early childhood educators establish and maintain respectful partnerships with colleagues and other service providers. And it continues on. The next one is early childhood educators work in ways that maintain and enhance human dignity and promote the acceptance of diversity. You see how it's really evolving and changing and really taking into consideration the UN rights of the child as well as human rights from the UN. Early childhood educators pursue on an ongoing basis the knowledge, skills, and self-awareness needed to be professionally competent. That one is so beautifully worded, it was never changed. It's so awesome, thank goodness. A new principle, early childhood educators promote and maintain their own social, emotional, physical, and spiritual well-being to meet their professional responsibilities. So, and we all know that in the sector, we don't put enough emphasis on our own self-care.
Yes.
And so now we've added in that principle. Principle 9, early childhood educators demonstrate integrity in all of their professional relationships. It's actually early childhood educators demonstrate integrity and respect. We really wanted to bring out the fact that we are respecting each other in our professional relationships. And another new principle, brand new, hot off the presses. This actually hasn't even been published yet. We're just finalizing it. Early childhood educators take collective responsibility to work through education, research, and advocacy for the promotion of every child's right for access to quality early care and learning services. So it's really like these are 25 years old, the original ones.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And we've really, really taken them.
Yeah, it's getting revamped, right? And it does make sense. And I really like the part that ECs really have to take care of their emotional and mental health. And obviously
100%.
physical health is important, but then sometimes we neglect our emotional and mental health. And I really believe that we get 1 day mental health day for all ECs. It's so important.
Nice? Oh,
Yeah. Actually, at the Y, we had it. They started it during my last years at the Y. They started it. You can just call up and say, I'm not feeling well, or I just don't want to come in. No excuses given, no reasons given. Just stay home for yourself, you know.
Exactly.
And you just need time for yourself. And it's so important because I remember when I was an ECE, I had little kids of the same age, you know, so I really never got a break. So, and I'm pretty sure it happens with so many ECEs, right? That they don't really get a break, right? So I remember one of our staff members, it's a life comes to like a complete circle. I used to sub for her when she was at the Y, and after 10 years we meet at SprottTalk. It was so funny. And I used to sub for her. So I never saw her face, but I knew her name. So that was Monica, who was doing our practicum coordination. That was so funny. And she told me she used to have a 3-year-old daughter, but the weekend and she was a single mom those days, and so she said she would just stay away from her daughter for 1 day just for adult interaction, because the whole week she would be at the childcare and then evening with her daughter. So she said, Rima, I never get to talk to adults, and I need that adult time. So it's so important. I really didn't realize that. I said, yeah, that's true. You really need that adult time. So, and that's part of your mental well-being, you know, mental health.
That's impossible here. We're so short-staffed that we're required to come into work sick, tired, angry, stressed, whatever, because there is 0 people, less than 0 people to cover for us.
Yeah. And I think we should change it. I hope NDP really brings in that push and the, you know, the incentives needed to be, you know, given out to ECEs. And
it's part of the reason why I'm here. I'm part of the government-funded group here in Kamloops, because we are so short with a need for ECE workers in this town.
Yeah.
So Lisa, I noticed you made a comment about you're surprised nothing about reconciliation and the 94 calls to action in terms of that. Actually,
Specifically.
Yeah, well, actually within, so as it's being shown, there's, so you have your code of, you have your overall ethics, your principle, then you have a description of it, then you have your implications to practice. All those implications to practices are changing. And within the new implications to practice, ECEBC is committed to work with the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society. We started that about 5 years ago. Within those implications, it is now quoted in terms of Indigenous awareness and support and reconciliation and focus to the 94 calls to action. Having worked...
We've been talking a lot about it in our class.
Yeah, I worked actually for 20 years before SprottShaw with exclusively with Indigenous Tribal Council up north, and ran an Indigenous language nest program. So within the new implications, there's the reconciliation, truth and reconciliation work in the 94 calls to action, which is absolutely beautiful.
Great.
And I think, Carla, don't we think our ECs need more training to work with children from the Aboriginal society. They are totally different set of children. And most of our students, like, forgive me if I'm coming in your way, but just I wanted to let you know that they come from Japan, they come from China, they come from Asian countries. They have no idea. They don't even know what their history was. And so they cannot
didn't know.
There you go.
Yeah. And what's interesting now is because the provincial government, the BC provincial government has made a commitment to respecting Indigenous approach. In terms of even the language we use, the messaging that we're giving, the appropriate language that we're using, from being a Native to First Nations to Aboriginal, and it means something totally, totally different. And that's what's interesting is you're right? Not all of us have that experience. And that's where our responsibility to our code of ethics, to our Indigenous partners come into play, where we are making that commitment. Most definitely. I'm very fortunate to be able to bring that forward, having done work with the BC Aboriginal Childcare Society and understanding that importance. It starts with messaging and it starts with a commitment, 100%. And thank you for bringing that up. It's so, so crucial.
Yeah, because I worked in a center which was high needs, and most of the children were First Nations children.
Yes.
And I was shocked. I said, this is not the Canada I knew. Right. What is this, right? And then I learned it when I was at work on my job. Then, and then I asked my managers to give us a little bit more training how to work with children, because they come from a totally different culture. Because like once a child from First Nation says, Rima, I have two dads. And I said, okay. And I didn't know how to react because that's part of their culture, that both the dads are living in the same house. And what can I say to that, right? So how am I supposed to react, right? And what am I supposed to talk to other children about it, right? So all of this training is really needed. And they are such culturally sensitive issues. Like, okay. And I was a new ECE and I didn't know, to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
So all of it is needed to coach. And I hope ECEBC gives that coaching, right? Now, Lisa, you work with the government. So, I mean, you're in partnership with the government. So kind of we need all that kind of a coaching. So I will just go briefly touch for the implications of the practice. So obviously, we don't even not only take care of the physical needs, emotional needs are the prime importance, and being sensitive to the child's needs. So if we are in attunement with the children, then we know what their needs are. But if we are mentally switched off and only our physical body is present, then obviously we don't know, right? What is the child going through? So that's very important. And whatever happens with the child is usually written down in an incident book, which is only for the center. So even they could be very small, minor incidences regarding the families, regarding the child, something the child told you. It has to be written down in the book. It has to be in the log so that the other staff members, they know about it, what happened, and we are all on the same page. So if something happens, we are kind of mentally prepared, right? And when I was working with children with high needs, things just happen. And if you're not trained, if you are not, aware of what's happening in this child's family, you might not take the right decision. And therefore, many ECs went wrong in handling certain situations because they didn't know the background of it, or they were not told. So like all of these children have a lot of issues with trust, because they are moved from foster family to another foster family. So they kind of need a lot of time to build trust with ECEs, because they think, maybe I won't go to the same home again. And I saw it when I was working with children, right? Today, their family just changed. And I'm like, okay, what is the government doing? Why is it changing? But I have no control over it. But once I have established trust with them, I know that I'm doing my job and they trust me. And there's a kind of a bond between me, the kid and me. And I know that I'm doing the right thing for his future. And that's such a precious feeling that I'm doing the right thing for him and I'm trying to understand him, because they are very impulsive children. Most of them have fetal alcohol, and it's very hard for them to understand or follow the rules in the center. So obviously they're going to break all the rules. They're going to challenge you all the time. And I went through a lot of trauma and heartbreak sometimes, because it was very hard for me to understand sometimes, because there was once a boy, and every morning I thought I was a new ECE. I would keep his breakfast ready, and he would just come and just just throw away the breakfast, and I didn't understand, because it would be Cheerios and milk and Rice Krispies. That was the breakfast offered at 7 a.m. in the morning when his foster parent would drop him. And then I realized it's only through that he had kind of an OCD, because why would he throw up a temper tantrum every morning he saw that breakfast? So the only thing he wanted was, he wanted to pour the milk himself. He wanted the Rice Krispies at a certain level. He wanted the Cheerios at a certain level. And it is through a lot of trauma I understood that, because I didn't know that he had OCD. I didn't know that he was fetal alcohol. All I knew was that he's living with foster parents. But I thought he didn't like me, and I took it very personally. So, and it took me a while to understand, right? So I hope it doesn't happen often with other ECs that happened to me. And we are kind of ready for those situations, right? When we know the child very well, then we can take care of the child from a different perspective, not like a typical, easygoing, typical family child. Like you put the breakfast out, they're happy, they eat, and they go and play. But for them, it's food is a big thing. And he was a hoarder, and he would sit, right? The kid would sit at the breakfast table right from 7 in the morning till like 10, because there was food insecurity at home. So he didn't know when the next meal would come. So it took me a while to understand all these issues. And so therefore, when we talk about creating and maintaining safe and healthy environments, it's not only the physical environment, because licensing is mostly talking about the physical environment, right? The structure, the infrastructure, the cleaning practices, different types of how you should have their first aid kits and allergy and so on, so forth taken care of. But a healthy environment would also mean warm interactions with the children, and you are in attunement with the children, so you can cater to their needs, right? And then when we are, the next one is, we always cater to their development. So it's a wholesome, integrated development of the child. So whenever we are trying to do activities, we don't want to focus only on one aspect of their, as you said in the beginning, we want to cover most of the aspects through our activities, right? So the physical, emotional, social, cultural, linguistic, so on and so forth. So we want to provide them those activities, and which are, the child is interested in it. So that's what it is. And and when we provide activities which the child feels good about, and he can achieve it, and he can get on to the next level, so you are kind of providing him that self-esteem that you can do it, right? Or when you are giving them choices, if you just give them one type of fruit, this is banana, in the morning you're going to have a banana, you are not really providing them self-esteem. But when you offer them choices, doesn't matter, it doesn't cost much. If you are providing food to the children, it doesn't cost much for the child care center to provide choices, a little bit of a choice, right? At least bananas and apples. Would you like to have bananas, or would you like to have apples? So it kinds of giving them choices helps them to build up their self-esteem, that what they want is being considered, right? And it's kind of a tricky, they are your choices. That's what I was told, and that's what I have understand, that they are all our choices. It's just the child is made to believe that yes, he's getting his way of doing things, or he's getting some kind of an independence to choose things which he wants to do. And I think it's a good thing, because I come from a family, I'm from India, and I come from a family where adults tell you what to do all the time, my way or the highway. That was it. And I learned it how bad it was. So I did not, even though when my kids were born, I was not an ECE, but I decided not to do that with my children. And when I became an ECE, it was all the more important, because you are kind of shaping the child's brain to take decisions for himself at every moment of his life, right? So you don't want the adult to be instructing. So because when they are adults, they are like, okay, they are like, they have no radar, or they don't have a compass in life, because they were never taught to make decisions for themselves, right? So I went through that when I was in my youth, and I needed my mom to tell me everything, what to do, right? What's my next step, what I should be doing, because when I was a kid, she always told me what I was supposed to be doing, right? And when I was left on my own, it took me a while to get used to my freedom. So, but when we are giving choices to children from the very beginning, they kind of understand. They will understand that we have to choose what is good for me, And the adult is always around. If they make a mistake, you're always around to support them. So we shouldn't be worried about giving them choices because we are always ready to support them from getting into danger or. So the next one is refrain from any way degrading. So we already know that if a child has a pee accident or if the child is not able to say some sentences or is stammering or stuttering or the way a child looks, and sometimes children, even young children, have issues about how they look, right? Or why am I looking different? Or why am I so dark? Or, why do I have curly hair when everybody has straight hair? Or something like that. And they become very conscious about their appearance. So how are you going to support that, right? Anything, they come and tell you about issues endangering, frightening, or harming children, right? So if you tell them, firstly, I'll talk about, and if they have issues at home and they're trying to tell you, but sometimes they don't tell you. So do you have a connection with them that they are able to share with you whatever is worrying them, whatever is bothering them from inside, or they are afraid of something, or they are afraid of a particular person in their family, or they are being abused or neglected. So when we have that kind of connection, we build those relationships, we get that kind of information. And obviously, we don't want any ECs to inflict any bodily harm, but we could do a lot of emotional harm, when we say, right, oh, you have to finish your lunch and then you can go out and play. We are not doing that in our childcare centers, right? We offer them choices. Do you want to have lunch now, or you want to go and play outside and then you come and have lunch, right? It happens sometimes we bring it from our culture. I brought it from my culture in my childcare center, but then I was told that you can't do that. You can't say that, oh, you have to finish your food first and then you go out and play. Because you are kind of inflicting your power on the child, right? So you are endangering them, you're kind of harming them. So it could eventually lead into abuse or some kind of a neglect. So you want to save yourself from doing that, right? Because it could become a licensing issue. So one of the positive aspects, everything is a positive aspect, but it also supports you, because if you're following the code of ethics, it prevents you from falling into the well, right? Committing mistakes, which could be you're violating any licensing rules. And sometimes ECs are not aware of that it might come under abuse or neglect. It does come under abuse and neglect when you force children to eat, right? So sometimes you are just doing it out of culture because it happened in your culture. That's the way you were brought up. So you think it's okay because your intentions are good, right? But unfortunately, that's not the way that happens in the childcare centers. And act as an advocate on behalf of all children and public policies. So yes, you are already there if you're working with the government, so I have nothing to say about it. But with students, we ask them to join ECEBC. We want them to know more about political parties who are standing up, parties which are standing for the rights of ECEs. They want to put money in the childcare. They want to look for people who want to donate into this business, and and provide support, right, from the other sectors, right, from the medical sector, from the educational sector, from the corporate sector. We all come in together for childcare because they are our foundation. So if that is clear among all the, sections of the society, I don't think so there should be a problem. But sometimes somewhere things are not clear. So, we think, oh, okay, why do we need that kind of funding? Why are ECs need to be paid so much? They are just babysitters, right? So to remove that stigma of a babysitter, it's a big thing, right? We have to create that awareness. And I think as ECs, when we take pride in our work, we kind of bring an awareness in the public that we go much, much more beyond. We have the training, and we are well qualified and educated, and our trained professional work ethic will go a long way in the child's development, right? So that's a big thing. Anything, Carla, you would like to add here, or Lisa, you would want to ask?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Lisa, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. All right. So I will just touch, now it's just last 10 minutes left, so I'll just touch base upon a few of the important things. So also, the culture is a big thing in our ECE, and being culturally sensitive is the most important thing. So how do you approach parents? If you think, if you're a new ECE and if you think you are not well equipped, it's a better idea to go through people who've been there in the field, who have been in the center, and just run by them first the question, oh, I want to talk about this to the parent, and how do I approach, and is it okay if you're not aware of it, or go research about the culture, find out what's the best way to approach certain things. Obviously, we do all those cultural celebrations of different cultures, and you will read it in your textbooks also. How do you incorporate the child's culture through your activities, through the way you greet the parents, you greet the grandparents, and you follow as much as you can in the childcare center. If the parent says, like, we don't touch, like in India, we have a cultural thing like babies, you don't touch the top of their head because it's considered to be a very what you can say, a spiritual place, this top of the head. They think that you are in connection with the God, right? And not everybody is allowed to touch it because it's not appropriate. Only family members can do it for little children. So we need to know these minor things. Not many times we know it, right? So, or example, in Iranian culture, thumbs up is actually really bad, right? So we find out about all these small things, small gestures, and we are always culturally aware. And about food and culture go a long way, right? Like I had an incident when I was working with a Muslim kid, and they don't eat pork. And for whatever reason, the staff, they made pizza, and in the pizza, of course, the meat was pork, right? So they didn't know the child ate it, so they were ethically correct. They went to the parent in the evening and they said, we are so sorry. We realized that, and next time we will make sure. So I learned a lot from that ECE, that she made it a point that she will go and own up that, the child ate, although there was a vegetarian option, but the child still chose to eat the meat, and they couldn't say no to the child. So the dad said, no, that's fine. My child is going to grow up in Canada, and we were happy that the dad was okay with it. So, and he said, that's fine, don't worry about it. So, and I thought that this was an extremely ethical decision. We could have, forgotten about it and not told the parent, but it was because it's better that you to go and tell the parent first rather than the child goes and tells you that he had pork at school. So those are the, minor nuances, but they go a long way in establishing relationships with parents, and the parents really appreciated it. As we go through our ECE modules, we understand what kind of strategies, what kind of practices are ideal for the optimum physical, social, emotional, and moral and cognitive development of the children. And concerning about individual differences, so taking care of, if you are considering every family individually, and if you consider their preferences and know what their choices are and what their expectations are, I think you are putting in a lot, right? Because many centers have different ways of integrating it. They either have a book or they have a log, and every time a new child comes in, the more information they have about the family through the registration package, or if they had a chat with the parents, so on and so forth, you want to let everybody in your staff know that this is what the parents are, this is where they come from, this is what their expectations are. So and sometimes some parents are really not even talking about cultural practices, they are very academically oriented, right? So how do you take care of that, and where do you bring a balance, right? Sometimes parents go too ahead with their expectations from a 3-year-old for academics. So how do you deal with that situation? So, and how do you manage it? It's all about individual differences. And then they are talking about using developmentally appropriate materials for children. So some children have dexterity issues, some children have, ADHD, some autism, all of that. So how do you modify your materials, right? How do you adapt your materials? So there is a thing called universal design learning, in that you don't, I really like that principle, because your classroom is already set up, in the UDL principle, for any kind of child to adapt to the materials in the classroom. So you don't wait for a child with needs to come in and then you change, but your classroom is set up in such a way that children with different skill levels, they can easily transition into your classroom. So that's what the UDL principles talks about, and you can a little bit later research if you are not aware of it. And now there are a few last 5-10 minutes left, so I will just see if I have missed out anything. So this one I would want to talk about: encourage and provide opportunities for parents to participate actively in all aspects of planning and decision making that affect their children, right? So through conferences, through one-on-one talks, through parent-teacher meetings, through celebrations, that's how you know more about the parents, you know more about their expectations. And through the registration package and ongoing newsletters, and these days they have all sorts of apps where you can find out, what are the parents' expectations, how happy they are with your center, and what they would like from you more. So obviously they feel happy about it, and the money they are putting in your childcare center goes a long way in building up with the trust of the parents, right? So and that's what this is where you can solve the issues. Parents who are academically oriented and more want children to read and to write by the time they're 5, then you want to tell them that there are other aspects of a child's development which needs to be taken care of too. So you work towards that. I would talk about assist families. So there are many families. I mean, every family at some time would need some kind of a resource program, and many times families are not aware that these programs are available in the community. So as ECEs, we are the ones who kind of build those connections with the community providers, and we help the parents get connected and and show them those resources. And as much as we can do in our centers ourselves, like if parents that parents need muddy buddies, parents need boots, parents need even material things, how are you going to help those parents starting from the very basic material things? Sometimes parents just need counseling themselves because they don't know how to parent, because for whatever reason their parents were not the best parents. So, and it's a vicious cycle. So how do you break that cycle when they themselves didn't get good parents and they don't know how to parent? So then they need those special workshops, or partners having issues among themselves, which have a huge impact on the children, right? When parents don't get along very well with each other, or they're going through a process of separation or divorce, that's the saddest part of a child, right? And then the child feels responsible, right? They think, oh, I did something wrong, therefore my parents are separating, right? So all of these things are, they're going to make or break the child's mental health, right? So how do you bring the parents, the children, the staff, everybody involved together and provide them the right type of services? And also confidentiality, right? It's a big thing. Anything about the child is obviously even like simple things like when I was working in the field, even diapering schedule, one parent is not supposed to know another child's diapering schedule, right? Or so how do you keep it that confidential, right? Because parents have a Yes, unfortunately, they have this thing of comparing. Oh, my child had 2 poos and your child had only 1 poo. How come? Right? Things like that. So in this comparison business takes place. So you want to avoid that and you don't want to have such discussions happening. Um, and the last one I would talk about is human dignity, is anti-bias everywhere, culturally, gender, occupation, economics, whatever ways we are separated in our society and we think I'm different. We need to be aware of our biases. Maybe sometimes we carry a baggage from our own culture and we want to, sometimes gets transmitted knowingly or unknowingly. So making sure that those things don't happen, right? And we always, the very big thing comes about is gender stereotyping, right? We don't want boys to be playing with this and girls to be doing that, or girls sit quietly and girls do those activity and boys are the ones who are running around. So are we aware when we are talking in our vocabulary, right? Are we putting in those words? Are we putting in those ideas in the children's minds, right? So being aware of this. So those are all our anti-bias interactions. Or if a child who has special needs, are we sometimes, giving extra, what do you say, like, parenting the child all the time just because he has lots of needs? That doesn't need to be done. The child doesn't need to be singled out just because you are a special needs child, so we are paying extra attention to you. That's not the way. It has to be in a very inclusive way. So we are not like, what's the word? It is starts from P. I forgot about it. It's not patenting. What's that word, Carla?
What were you talking about?
Like when the child has special needs and you kind of like overprotect the child all the time from other children. You don't want to do that.
Protecting them?
Protecting, it starts from P. It's like, it's out of my mind right now. Like, not patenting, not patenting. It's another word. Patronizing. Patronizing.
Lisa, yeah, we and I were going to say it at the same time.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. So, yeah, so I used to be aware of that I'm not patronizing the child in front of all the children, that he's just a typical child, and you can educate the children that yes, this is what he does things this way, or these are the things he needs extra help, but not to be singling out the child just because he has special needs or something like that. So that's how you're promoting, any kind of anti-bias interactions. Support and promote the dignity of self others. We already, it's kind of understood. And obviously, all your programs and all your curriculum planning and all your interactions with the staff are obviously based on respect for everything: gender, culture, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation. And so sexual orientation, I mean, you all know about it, but if I had students who didn't know about it, right, like some parents are gay parents, or single gender families, right, 2 moms or 2 dads, right? So how do you explain it to the children, right? And how do you interact with those parents, especially if you have never met them before? So how do you? It's okay to ask them, how should I call you? How should I address you? And they are fine. I've always seen with gay families or lesbian families that they are very open to questions and they don't get hurt if you ask them beforehand, rather than you hurt them unknowingly, right? So it's better to be straightforward and ask them in a very gentle and a respectful way. If we have this and this is the thing, I don't understand this part, could you explain me, please? And of course, do your homework too. So you kind of, the respect is always there. Anything, I'll just check. It's almost 8 o'clock. The last part is talking about being in constant, upgrade of our professional, qualifications, and just being aware of what's happening in the field, what's new, what's the latest research, taking workshops. And I would work in a place where the childcare provider is sending me to workshops, and and I don't have to shell money from my pocket. So, and making them aware that it's their responsibility also, that they provide us those workshops and see that we are qualified for our next 5 years, that our license is intact. So it's kind of come to terms with the childcare providers. I know it's hard sometimes, but as much as you can talk and come to a decision. Okay. The communications is a big thing about when we are talking with parents. So EC's communications, how we communicate, what is our body language, understanding cultural, identity, like, if you come from a certain culture, how am I supposed to present myself? What am I supposed to talk? What I should not be doing or what I should be doing? All of this. So communications happens in many ways, one-to-one, emails, newsletters, apps, whatever way. So, and I think the more you know yourself, the better professional you will be. So if you know what your beliefs are, what your conditionings are, what is something you should be aware of, and you should have a filter, right? Be aware of yourself before you make a move. The more we are self-aware, I think the better professional we will be, because we know where we are lacking, right? Because we might end up making mistakes, and we might end up putting our job into trouble and our license eventually. And everything about children. So if it is disclosures, if abuse, neglect needs to be reported, doesn't need to be reported to the manager, you can go directly, call the licensing and the ministry and report abuse or neglect. I think that's it, basically. Lisa, if you have any questions, or Carla, you would like to add, please feel free.
Yeah, Lisa, I just and Monica and Rima, I just wanted to say that in order to maintain the integrity of our code of ethics.
This is what online learning is like lately.
Oh, I know. We just want to remember that ECEBC does have the Best Choices Ethical Journey workshop series. It is 4 modules. And to better understand the code of ethics and ethical dilemmas and everything that we're faced with is we as Best Choices guides, right, walk you through a journey of ethical discovery, right, and awareness. And it really does speak to your professionalisms. What we do in the Best Choices Ethical Journey is participants will take that opportunity to explore your own personal values and beliefs, because that does impact your ethical behavior. Also your assumptions, and you examine the complexities in ethical decision making based on the Code of Ethics for ECEBC. And we know that our certificate to practice through the ECE registry, if for any reason at any time you are investigated, once you have your 5-year certificate to practice, at any time that a complaint comes in and they investigate you, there can be conditions placed on your certificate to practice to complete the Best Choices Ethical Journey. Your branch there, I'm really familiar with Kamloops. I lived there for 9 years. I know the area well. I know the professionals in the area there. Your branch actually has sponsored Best Choices. And it really does speak to your ethical commitment to the sector through the Best Choices ethical journey. And it's all based on the Code of Ethics. And I highly, highly encourage you to possibly take it. We are looking at offering it via online as well. We're setting up an online platform. So once it hits the airways online, I really do recommend that anybody can take it. I do highly, highly recommend it, because then you really get into the meat of it, into the understanding of it through qualified guides to teach it. And that's all I have to say. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful ethical journey. Each of our journeys are different in terms of our ethical behavior. And
it keeps on evolving too, right?
Yes, it does. And I highly recommend and I salute you and I commend you for being here tonight with us. You're the only student, and that's that first step in terms of that ethical journey.
Yes, I would want to clap for you too. Yes, you took it
Right.
very seriously. Yes.
SprottTalk College since 1903.